Great. Okay. With the signing of the Inflation Reduction Act, Reclamation takes on a new opportunity to invest in our infrastructure and benefit the American public for the next generation. For opening remarks today, I would like to introduce Reclamation's Deputy Commissioner of Operations, David Palumbo. Deputy Commissioner, are you with us?
I am. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Carrie. It's wonderful to be with you all. Um, as you said, Carrie, with the signing of the Inflation Reduction Act by President Biden, there's just a tremendous opportunity to bring resources to bear for the American West and very acutely tribes across the American West. Going back to President Biden signing the bipartisan infrastructure law, we made a commitment in reclamation across the federal government to make sure we implemented not only the bipartisan infrastructure law and subsequent laws, which of course the Inflation Reduction Act is one of those, to do so in a very transparent and timely manner. And so that's part of the reason why we're here today. With Section 50231 under the Inflation Reduction Act, we have resources that are geared specifically for disadvantaged communities. And in this particular case, the program that we constructed under 50231, the $550 million that we received, we constructed a program focused on tribal domestic water. And there are a variety of reasons why we did that. Focusing on tribes, focusing on the needs of tribes, and allowing this funding to go for planning, design, and construction, which you're going to hear about, and address those dire needs of tribes for clean consistent access to clean drinking water, to piped water in homes for beneficial use by tribal families is so vitally important. Tribes, as we know, bear the brunt of impacts from climate change, and we want to make sure we address that. We want to make sure we address the President's Justice 40 initiative, making sure that we bring environmental justice to tribal communities. And what you're going to hear is very responsive to those objectives. The cost share or lack of cost share opportunities with this program, you'll hear about the flexibilities that the program has with respect to planning, design, construction, and perhaps a subsequent construction outside of this initial phase of the program. So again, just very honored to be with you all. We have a wonderful resource here. We have just incredible, smart, dedicated people in Reclamation. Carrie and Natalie, who you'll hear from next, constructed this program, and we want to have a good dialogue here today as you hear from us, and we would like to hear from you with any questions you have. And with that, Natalie, I'm going to turn it back over to you, or turn it to you from Carrie. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Palumbo, for your opening remarks. Thank you all again for your attendance and participation. Please hold all questions until the end, or place your questions in the chat. Section 50231 of the Inflation Reduction Act provides Reclamation with $550 million to remain available through September 30, 2031 for disadvantaged communities for up to 100% of the cost of the planning, design, or construction of water projects, with the primary purpose of which to provide domestic water supplies to communities or households that do not have reliable access to domestic water supplies. Reclamation has allocated $320 million of the $550 million made available for the Tribal Domestic Water Supply Program.
All right, so Reclamation is going to carry out this authority in a variety of ways. One of them is this new tribal domestic water supply program. And we're going to implement this in two phases. So the first of which is a request for proposals that opened April 2nd, 2024, and will close August 4th, 2024. So it is open now. And we sent this information out as a Dear Tribal Leader letter, and then we also have the information available on our website at the address shown. Please note that this program is not available on grants.gov. You will not find it there, so please use our website or that Dear Tribal Leader letter to obtain that information about the request for proposals. We are trying out a different approach for proposals and really hoping to be responsive to some of the tribal needs and opportunities expressed during consultation about the federal grants process. So awards made under this funding, under this program, will be through federal financial assistance. And we're going to talk about mostly phase one of this program's implementation today, and briefly we'll touch on phase two at the end of the presentation. Okay, so the first thing you need to know in order to seek funding under this program is the eligibility information. So an eligible project would be one that is owned and operated by a tribe or tribal organization in the 17 Western states. And that project must have a primary purpose to serve domestic water supplies to enhance reliable access to those supplies. So I've put a couple key definitions on this slide that are important to note. One is domestic water supplies. So we have defined that for the purposes of this program as those for human use and consumption. The opportunity is available for domestic water supplies to households and communities. And for communities, we're really looking at those facilities and projects that provide a local public good or a local communal good, the examples being a school, hospital, nursing home. And then the primary purpose of the project. So we've defined that for the purposes of this program as at least 80% of the average annual deliveries associated with the project's water will be for domestic water supplies. We'll talk a little bit about what happens if you meet that threshold, but there is some other beneficial use associated with the water supplies. But the most important thing to know about that is Reclamation is only interested in funding under this program those domestic water supply components of the project. All right, eligible projects. I've sort of listed high-level categories here up on the slide. They include but are not limited to, right? So if you have specific questions about your specific project, I really do encourage you to reach out and let's talk about it. Some examples being, pipes, surface water intakes, diversions or distribution systems, storage tanks, water treatment facilities for potable supplies and associated features. So we really think there's a wide variety of domestic water supply projects that are eligible here. And so if you have a question about yours, we would encourage you to reach out. All right, so I touched briefly on sort of if it's not for domestic water supply purposes, but kind of full stop. These are the types of projects we're not looking to fund under this program. Again, if a small portion of your project does serve one of these needs, then it's a conversation starter for us, but it could make review of your proposal more challenging and involved. So examples here, water for casinos, hotels, golf courses, resorts, water for future development. We certainly understand the needs there, but that's not what we're intending to fund with this program. And then water for things like commercial or irrigation uses. And the important part there is in the title that we're not going to fund those portions of your project if it is otherwise eligible and meets that 80% domestic water supply delivery threshold. Okay, ineligible projects. There's more information in the request for proposal on an expanded list of ineligible projects, but I did want to highlight a few here. So the first would be projects that have been already authorized by Congress. That includes authorized rural water projects and Indian water rights settlements. If you have a question about those or your project has some kind of nexus to an authorized reclamation project, please reach out to us. We're happy to kind of run it to ground and see if there's any there, given this prohibition in our program. Projects that are sort of related in any way to any ongoing litigation. We also would not include under the purview of this program. And then your typical routine operations and maintenance activities. Those are not something we're looking to fund here, especially given that the tribe must cover or the tribal organization must be responsible for the operations and maintenance of the project. Right. Over to you, Natalie.
This program does not have a mandatory cost share and can provide up to 100% of federal funding for eligible project costs. Only projects or portions of projects where the scope of work and activities are discrete and identified and do not already have funding from a separate source will be funded. Funds requested through this announcement cannot be duplicative of any other federal, state, or local award. We ask that proposals are clear as possible with what other funding sources may be involved and how that impacts the overall project being considered for reclamation funding through the Tribal Domestic Water Supply Program. A lack of clarity could hinder the evaluation of the application completeness for proposals. Tribal applicants can apply for planning activities, including but not limited to studies and environmental compliance with project costs up to $3 million. Projects should be completed within 1 year of the date of award. Design activities, including environmental compliance with project cost up to $5 million. Design project planning. Design projects should be completed within 2 years of award. Planning and design activities with project costs up to $8 million. Projects should be completed within 3 years of award. Or construction activities with project cost up to $50 million. Projects should be completed within 5 years of the date of award. Applications for construction are standalone requests and cannot be combined with planning or design activities. Applications must demonstrate that design has been fully completed and described in the proposal such that readiness to proceed can be evaluated. If there are outstanding design work activities for your project, we recommend you apply for the design funding. The application package includes the SF424, SF424A, SF424B, or SF424D forms, a technical proposal, a budget proposal, and a budget narrative. Tribal applicants must be registered in SAM.gov prior to submitting an application and provide a valid, unique entity identifier in the application. All applicants are subject to the single audit requirements outlined in 2 CFR 200 subpart F.
Okay, so I'll talk through a couple of components of that request for proposals, one being that the technical proposal. So that can be found in section D.2.4. And what we're looking for there is really the high-level executive summary of what you're requesting, including that location information or service area or proposed location information, right, in the case of planning. How the key priorities of the project align well with our program, how urgent and compelling the need for reliable access to domestic water supplies is characterized in the proposal, and then, a very detailed project description. So given what you can include in 75 pages, that is what we're looking for here in this technical proposal. And some of the components of that detailed project description include, your scope of work, your milestones, the problems, needs, and opportunities you're addressing through the project, or how you intend to do so, the anticipated benefits, who will be served, compliance or anticipated compliance with legal and institutional requirements, and of course, environmental compliance considerations. Right, and then let's go to the budget proposal and narrative. So really a budget proposal, what we're looking for here is, what is as detailed as you can possibly get it, or as refined as it is in your application, will serve us better in reviewing it, right? So what is the budget for the proposed planning, design, and/or construction project? And how is that supported, right? Where did those numbers come from? What's the narrative on how that all came together? And so for a template, we do have Appendix A on our website, and you are welcome to use that. It does provide additional guidance. That budget detail narrative template is a suggested format to present that breakdown of any estimated costs by category needed to accomplish project activities. And we'd be happy to connect you with anyone in our financial assistance office as well to answer specific questions about the budget proposal and narrative requirements. And then back to you, Natalie, for the application submission information.
Applications will be accepted through August 4th, 2024. There will be 3 application delivery options, including email, U.S. mail, and express mail. Applications cannot be submitted through grants.gov. As applications are received by the Native American and International Affairs Office, confirmation of receipt will be provided via email.
Sorry, I'm playing mouse games with my unmute button. Okay, so we mentioned earlier that we're trying out somewhat of a different approach to this program. And where you'll see that most visible is in what we call the merit review and selection process. So this is a non-competitive program. What the heck does that mean, right? Well, first I would say more information can be found in our request for proposal. But what we are really looking to do in a merit review is we're looking to determine eligibility of projects, and then identify any reasons why a proposed project would or would not be feasible or otherwise advisable for recommending for funding consideration. And so we do plan to evaluate those based on those criteria that I've put on the screen: application completeness, program priority alignment, project approach, and feasibility. However, these proposals will not be ranked or scored. So what that means is we're really looking at your proposal on an individual level and assessing it for, criteria alignment, if you will. And because this is also a non-competitive program, we may be reaching out to you during that process for some additional information if it's not clear to the review team, and that would be helpful. So we see that as a good opportunity here to make sure we fully understand what your project proposal intends. Okay, and while these won't be ranked or scored, we will prioritize submissions for consideration based on the cost effectiveness of the project, as well as that demonstrated urgent and compelling need. So if we're going from a baseline of 0 reliable access to reliable access, that would be prioritized in that sort of top tier. But we also know how important it is if you've got access, but it's not reliable, right? So that's kind of that secondary tier, both very worthy, but that's how we're planning to put these forth for consideration. And then ultimate selections will be made by Reclamation's commissioner, again, based on the merit of the proposal, alignment with our program's purpose, and any administrative priorities. Again, just to reiterate that awards will be made through financial assistance. So that's either a grant or a cooperative agreement.
If a tribal applicant is awarded an agreement as a result of this announcement, they will be required to submit interim federal financial reports, SF-425s, and interim performance reports as a part of the grant award. In addition to these reports, all tribal applicants awarded an agreement as a result of this announcement will be required to submit program-specific reports on an annual basis. And prior to closeout of an agreement for planning and design, the tribal applicant will be required to provide planning and/or design data for review and feedback by Reclamation. We anticipate the phase 2 announcement during the fiscal year 2027-2028 timeframe. Funding during this phase will be for construction activities only. All project proposals must demonstrate that planning and design has been successfully completed. Receiving funding under phase 1 is not a prerequisite for receiving funding under phase 2. However, priority will be given to those who were funded and successfully completed planning and design under phase 1. At this time, we invite discussion and comments. Please raise your hand and use the chat icon at the top of your screen, or submit questions by sending an email to tribaldomesticwaterprogram@usbr.gov. Hi, Sarah. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question? State the tribe that you're with and ask your question.
Yes, we do some work with Rosebud in South Dakota. And I'm wondering a little bit about if you could define further what cooperative agreements meant just a couple slides ago.
Sure. A cooperative agreement refers to an agreement that Reclamation has substantial involvement beyond reviewing reports. So if you're looking for assistance from Reclamation to work through some tasks with your project, that would be considered a cooperative agreement. Otherwise, it would be a grant to which you have the full responsibility of the award. I see a question in the chat also related to design and construction. So construction is a standalone application. So if design is not complete, then we recommend that you apply for design funding to complete those activities.
We have a question from Melissa Contreras, hand up. Melissa, go ahead and unmute when you're ready.
Yes, hi. I'm from the La Jolla Band of Indians. Recently, we had a few wells dug through a bore grant. And one of them we would like to complete the infrastructure to it, like the piping, the pump, get it operational and tied into our system. Would that would this money qualify to do the infrastructure for that? The board grant is already closed.
Yeah, I think really spelling out that how it's sort of discrete and its own, it may be adjacent or connected to, a previously funded or completed project, but sort of laying out why that distribution to from that well helps enhance reliable access, to me, is the key. And I think that something like that could potentially be eligible. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. So how many applications can a tribe submit with the caveat that they are different projects? There's no limit. So we would, ask you to prioritize amongst yourselves on what, your most urgent needs are, certainly, but there's not a limit so long as they are, those discrete projects, either of the planning and design or construction.
So is IDC eligible, and can funding include program and grant administration? So yes, IDC would be eligible, and oversight of the grant would absolutely be a cost included into the budget.
Looks like we have another hand up. Trish Connor, go ahead and unmute when you're ready.
Good morning. I'm with the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe in Northern Nevada. We have a project that has a lot of community support. They want to see improvement with our domestic water supply. So I didn't see that in the NOFO that we could include that. Do you think we can? Would it be beneficial to the application?
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm trying to recall. I do believe we have a couple questions about stakeholder support, or maybe it's framed as anything that would prevent implementation of the project, but that might be a good opportunity to talk about where there exists a lot of support such that implementation readiness, ties into that readiness to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Can you apply for both phases of the project? Can you apply for both phases of this program with the same project? No. You have to have planning and design completed before you can apply for construction funding.
And then we have, I think, do we have a hand raised?
Sherry, go ahead and unmute when you're ready.
Hi, good morning. I'm with the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community, and the project that I'm considering submitting is for a public water system that serves about close to 200 residential homes. And within this public water system, it is currently served by one well that's like about 25-ish years old. And when that well goes down, we have a backup connection to a nearby city. So we're just a customer to them if the well ever goes down. And what I'd like to do is drill another well as an additional source of water so that we're self-sufficient, along with, and then also add a transmission main that would carry that water to the existing water facility. So I wanted to know if that would be an eligible project.
Yeah, I think based on what you shared, again, read through that request for proposal, but to the extent that it can support the reliability of your supplies and sort of what that redundancy would add, and the self-sufficiency it might support, I think that'd be really important to characterize in the proposal. And I do think it sounds, again, as long as it meets all the other requirements, right? Sounds like something that could definitely be eligible under our program based on what you shared.
John.
I think Hayes was first.
Okay.
Hayes, go ahead and unmute when you're ready.
Perfect.
Thank you. If I want to submit a project for construction and my design is complete, does NEPA and other permitting have to be complete to apply for a construction project?
You can include the NEPA in your construction costs.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Okay. All right, John, whenever you're ready. John, you'll need to come off mute and whenever you're ready to ask your question.
Maybe while we wait, there's
Yeah.
a question in the chat. Can a project that had already been funded but at completion of design was estimated to be underfunded be submitted for supplementary construction funding through this program? I don't know enough about the project to answer that question. I don't know what already, depending on what already funded might mean. And whether you didn't receive, whether there wasn't sufficient funding to complete the design, this would provide an opportunity to potentially request, what you need to complete design. And then if, you are seeing costs increase as you're, in the construction phase, then this may be an opportunity to request construction funding. But again, that's going to depend on the type of project, where it's at, and of course, any environmental considerations there.
And it will also play, what also would play a role into this would be, what is the funding source
Right.
already provided for the construction funding? If it's
Yeah.
related to an authorized project or a settlement, then
Or another
those
grant
projects,
even.
right. So we would have to probably take a really close look at that to see where the other funding comes from. Just to clarify, a tribe can submit construction grant without previously receiving planning and design grant funding, as long as the design and planning is complete before the construction grant is submitted. Yes, that is correct.
Yes. So one of our goals in this program is to really offer support at every phase of a project. So that's why this first round we are having planning and design. And then in phase 2, we're hoping to have that be really for construction only. And those projects that, received funding for planning and design would have an opportunity for construction consideration. And then any projects that have already done that independently also have that consideration. So yes, if you've done planning and design, if you're ready to proceed, we would encourage you to look at construction funding for this phase 1.
Are these grants subject to Buy American, Build America? Yes, they are. One good thing that we have been discussing is that if you're applying for planning and design, you are intending to apply for phase 2 construction, you have a good idea of what sort of requirements that you'll need, what sort of materials that you'll need. And then if you are selected for the construction funding, you could work with the grants officer to potentially put in for waivers and at least have an idea of what you need to put in your waiver request. Can NEPA and EA expenses be included in planning and in the planning grants? Design, I would think, but
I think to the extent that NEPA compliance would be required, yes, but knowing at the planning and design phase, often it's not fully triggered yet. But certainly consultation with environmental specialists to figure out what may be needed, as well as any like state compliance or local sort of planning you'd like to do to evaluate impacts. That could be part of I think your budget, but that would be something we'd probably have some conversations about or question or want to see really supported very well.
Is there a link to the slide presentation available online? There will be. At the end of the presentation, the recorded presentation and the slides will be available on the Tribal Domestic Water Supply program site.
Yeah, and Chris just put the link to that again in the chat. Okay. Can we already engage an engineering firm in the preparation of the grant? Natalie, do you have any sort of advice on that one?
You can, however, that would be at your expense if you're not selected for award.
Okay, and then if partial funding is provided through another program, such as USDA Rural Development and tribal funds would fund the unfunded portion of the project, would it be eligible for this program? So we'd have to talk with the rural development folks about what their program's requirements are and how that would align with our program. We do allow for, multiple sources of funding for these projects, but we want to be clear about what those are, what the rules are associated with each one of those. So I'd say it depends, but please reach out and we'd be happy to discuss your specific project and how that might fit or not with this program. Okay. And then if a project improves infrastructure that serves both residential and commercial users, but is 80% residential or greater, such as replacing a water main, would the program be able to fund all of the construction or just a percentage that matches the residential flow? So it would, I think, we'd have to know a little bit more about the community pieces of that and especially the commercial side. And so what we would tend to say is that if there are commercial beneficial uses that aren't in service of sort of a public good, if you will, to the extent that you can break that out and show that we wouldn't fund that portion of the project. I understand that might be challenging actually in practice, right? We don't break up, this half of the pipe for this side and this half of the pipe for the other. But to the extent that you can allocate costs based on those beneficial uses, that's what's going to help us devise how much we could fund of your project or not. So again, would encourage you to reach out and maybe we can have a separate conversation about what that breakdown might ultimately look like. Okay, and then can you apply for construction funding if your project qualifies for a NEPA categorical exclusion? I don't see why not. As long as you are compliant with NEPA, and if that includes a categorical exclusion, then that process will be documented. So I don't see why not, unless you know something that we don't know, which is probably the case.
John, are you having issue? I can unmute your mic for you. Let's see. Yeah, I don't see that I can take you off of mute, John. If you can unmute yourself to ask your question. Or if you're having problems, could you put your question in the chat? Oh, he said his question was answered. Thank you, John.
Great.
Can funding go toward connecting tribal homes to public water systems that aren't tribally owned? The water system has to be tribally owned to be eligible for this program. Well, that's a good question, Mark. How will NEPA coordination be handled if multiple federal funding sources are involved? Harry, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Goodness. Yeah. So, right. In terms of lead federal agency, I think it would there's guidance on if multiple federal agencies are involved, who serves as lead, and we just have to figure out exactly where we are in that process. And then if it's a matter of reclamation, adopting something from another agency, partnering, especially if we hadn't been involved prior, but then would be. So it's going to depend, unfortunately, is my answer to you. But there's definitely a way to coordinate. It's just going to depend on your specific project and what those federal sources and then also federal involvement looks like beyond just funding, if it is that. Okay.
I think there's one more question in the chat that just popped up.
So there's two questions. Regarding mixed residential and commercial uses in water systems, IHS funds a percentage of the project based on equivalent dwelling units ratio, i.e. a community with 79% residential EDUs and 21% commercial EDUs would receive 79% of the estimated cost from IHS. Would BOR follow the same approach?
So the only reason I would say it depends is based on what those commercial uses are for. So again, if those commercial uses somehow serve, this like it depending on how you're defining commercial, and I'm sure IHS has a definition for that, right? Where we're trying to navigate what households and communities means per the law, that's kind of where we might split a little bit in terms of what that water is actually being used for. So we'd be happy to talk more on that, but I could see something similar being a reasonable approach depending on the project and the types of uses. And then we had our pre-award costs associated with grant proposal preparation allowed, and if so, should those costs be included in the budget?
We are not allowing pre-award costs. So if you have costs that have been already accumulated, those costs would not be considered allowable as part of the program.
Yeah, and I think the previous response was in regard to hiring someone to help with the grant proposal. And so the risk there is that if it's, not funded, you've paid for that and not received an award. Whereas here, if, you were to do some pre-award costs and be funded, that sort of risk would pay off, if you will, but we still aren't planning to pay for pre-award costs. I hope that's helpful, or at least clearer.
If the water system is owned by the city, but the source is from the tribe, are we eligible?
So the facilities do have to be tribally owned and operated. That's kind of a critical component of our proposal. So if there's, as always, there's a lot of nuance in everyone's project. So maybe we can talk more on that, but that is pretty central to our program's structure. Okay, can funding be used for serving residential and tribal government buildings? So to the extent that you can demonstrate that's providing that local public good, that's kind of in line with some of the examples we provided, school, hospital, that's where we'd like to have a conversation about why that fits with the communities that this law is intending us to support serving. So potentially.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, if there are no more questions, we want to thank you very.
Natalie, we did have one more question. Sorry. Looks like 3 more questions now. Mr. Doherty is asking about program funding prioritization. Do you want to take that one?
Will program funding be prioritized to areas where Bureau of Reclamation already has projects, e.g. Eastern Washington, or will coastal tribes where BOR has less of a current presence be included as well?
Yeah, so our goal really, with this funding is to provide an opportunity for, new supplies or increasing reliable access to supplies for, tribes in the 17 Western states. So if that's you, we'd love to hear from you, even if we have not had historically a relationship or we haven't funded something in a long time. We'd love the opportunity to hear what your needs are and whether there's a fit here. This is really an opportunity for us to engage with tribes outside of our formal settlement processes, outside of our authorized projects. So we would love to hear from you. Where we don't have a current presence or we haven't had one in a long time, or you know, where just there hasn't been as much opportunity, we'd love to hear from you.
Can the funding be used for tribally owned systems that serve non-tribal members but are still residential users? So as long as those residential users are still considered within a disadvantaged community, then those costs can be included into the proposal.
Yeah, and there's some information about how we define a disadvantaged community in our request for proposal. Okay, can funding be used for reimbursement of tribal water projects completed in 2024? So Natalie had mentioned that we're not allowing for pre-award costs at this time. So to the extent that we can get an award made and spent in calendar year 2024, I don't know, but I think it would be probably an uphill challenge if there's ongoing work right now happening. And in addition, we'd have to make sure it's all compliant on our end with NEPA and other laws. Okay. Can funding be used for tribally owned systems that are not tribally operated? We do, again, that tribal, that the tribes own and operate the facilities is pretty central to our structure. So if there's a separate operating entity, but the tribe maintains the oversight of that, let's maybe talk about what that might look like. Please reach out. We'd be happy to sort of discuss that more. I know there's a lot of nuance there in how facilities are owned and operated. So, and then there was one more comment that I received. So just again, these would be, financial assistance grants and the like. So those are done on a reimbursable basis. Is important to know as we move forward.
Could funding be used for development of new water rights? No. That would have an impact on Reclamation's responsibility in the long run. So I would say that would probably be considered an ineligible project.
Do you have a hand up? Whenever you're ready, you can come off mute, Jacob.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so our water system has been pretty upgraded, but as of lately, we do own it 100%, and it does go to our pueblo here. But we've been dealing with a lot of power outages here. So what we're trying to figure out, or what we're trying to do, is we're trying to hook our water system up to a generator system, so that for just this week, we ran into a 48-hour power outage here. So our water system was not running. So is that something the funding can go towards, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. I want to check the request for proposal because I do think we talk a little bit about like transmission, but not so much like a power source, like a backup power source. I think you know, maybe it's a little outside of the sort of standard I think that we were thinking about, but that's not a bad thing. So maybe just we should have a follow-up conversation to sort of understand a little bit better what that what the power that's needed would be, you know, how it would integrate with that system, where it would come from, how it all sort of come together. Sorry,
Okay.
I don't have a better answer for you.
Right. Cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Can funding be used for emergency interconnect to neighboring water districts?
So, I think in general, I would say that our program is really intended for those kind of long-term infrastructure that's going to be to provide that sustainable and reliable access to domestic water supplies. So it's less focused on short-term alternatives, if you will, especially given the, you know, prioritization based on cost effectiveness, you know, over some period of analysis. So I think that an emergency actions are not the best fit for this opportunity, but be happy to talk with you more about that. Tribal community members individually own the decentralized water system solution, such as wells, would that type of solution qualify? I don't know exactly. So if you're saying that, you know, a tribal member, like an individual, has a well on their property that they own and operate, and you know, depending on what that project is, it might not quite meet the scale, I think, that we're probably looking for, um, uh, given that we tend to work on the sort of the wholesale side. But happy to talk more. Should we include the cost of electrical use for the project? Not knowing anything about it, I'd say any relevant costs and benefits, you'll want to document that in your proposal. And then in the budget, the narrative will provide an opportunity for you to explain what those line item costs are and why they're included or not. Okay.
Any more questions? We may need power lines to the pumping station for, oh, is that an example for the previous question?
I think so. So it's really tied to what's your scope, right? So if something about the project, if you need that power to implement the project, then yes, I would include that in your full scope. So it's really clear to us. That helps us for all kinds of reasons, but also you to not miss out on some critical piece that would preclude implementation. Hey.
Does funding allow upgrading old, outdated SCADA systems?
So I think that might be a better fit for some of Reclamation's other efficiency opportunities, such as water and energy efficiency grants. Just given the net change you're going to see from a reliability standpoint, right? I think that that's, you know, probably step one in trying to figure out where you're maybe having leaks or issues or being better able to monitor your system. But I'm not sure that it's a great fit for a program like this, where we're really looking to enhance the water supplies. So the SCADA system itself won't maybe cause that net change. It may allow for, you know, some kind of evaluation of then what needs to be done to enhance the supplies. So I don't think it's a great fit for our program, if that makes sense. wastewater is not the purview. So the next question is, can wastewater component be funded? We're really on the water inside for this opportunity, and that's just in recognition of the language in the law, the available funding that we have. So it's not intended for really the wastewater side of things.
Any more questions? We have about 2 minutes left. Okay, if there are no more questions, I want to thank you all very much for your attendance and participation. This presentation will be available after this. Again, on behalf of the Bureau of Reclamation, thank you all for attending the webinar on tribal domestic water supply. You may also submit your questions to the Tribal Domestic Water Program at usbr.gov. And thank you all. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Please take care and reach out with your questions.